Welcome everyone to our webinar on the diversity in chemistry. It's a great pleasure to have the honor to chair this session where we will be talking about diversity, why we need diversity and what we can do to support diversity in chemistry with some amazing researchers and also advocates for diversity in chemistry. My name is Claudia Bonfio, and I am a junior group leader at the Institute for Supramolecular Science and Engineering in Strasbourg. And I just like to say that questions and comments are welcome from all of you, so you can either post your questions and comments in the Q&A or in the chat, preferably in the Q&A, and we'll try to address them during the session. In case we cannot do that, we'll try to save all of them and address them afterwards. I'll also mention that the session is being recorded, is already accessible to everyone, but it will be recorded and it will be shared on the EYCN, the European Young Chemists Network YouTube channel afterwards. So I'll start by telling you a bit about why we thought we needed a session about diversity in chemistry. In 2018 and in 2020, the Royal Society of Chemistry published a series of reports on diversity within their chemical community. And these reports drew together the best available data and evidence on diversity in different situations and environments. And their plan is to use this data as the foundation for their inclusion and diversity strategy to 2025. Unfortunately, what these data show is that in many situations, diversity is still lacking. A brief disclaimer about the following slides is that disparities between men and women in science are to some extent more documented compared to other minorities. And so the next few slides will mostly focus on data that are about gender balance. But of course, this does not mean that advocating for diversity equals to advocating for only for gender balance in science, but diversity goes beyond that and refers to all minorities, including ethnicity, nationality, religion, sexual orientation, and so on. So I just picked an example from the 2020 diversity data report of the Royal Society of Chemistry about the distribution of grants. And what you can see in the top part of the screen are the grants that were given by the Royal Society of Chemistry for events about outreach, about inclusion and diversity, and grants for carers. And what you can see is that there's quite a good distribution in terms of gender and also in terms of ethnicity. However, when one looks at the outcome of grants for research proposals, for research purposes, it is still balanced at the undergrad level, but it is not anymore balanced when we look at research funds that are given to early career researchers, mostly at the independent level, where only 20% of the awardees are women. If we look at the more expanded scene, at the European scene, what you will see from now on are data that are included in a report that is called the She Figures. That is a report from 2018 that is available on EURACCESS. And all the data you are seeing today are available online. You can easily find them. And according to this graph, what we can see is that women are underrepresented at the higher education level. And the more we go from PhD to postdoc and so on, the less we see women represented. And so these are just some of the data that are reported for major funding schemes at the European level. And these are data collected between 2014 and 2017. And what you can see in the graph on the left are the results for Marie Curie fellowships. In particular, if we look at the Marie Curie individual fellowships, which is the most external circle, you can see that about 43% of the awardees are women compared to men. But when we look at the grants that are given to independent group leaders, which are the ERC grants, we can see that women are underrepresented at the starting grant level, which is the first level, the entry level, let's say. About 35% of women get this grant. At the consolidator grant, at the consolidator level, less women are represented. At the advanced grant level, even less women are present. And these are just some results from the last ERC starting grant call, the one that was just shared. And you can see that a gender balance was more or less reached within the life sciences and social sciences and humanities panels. But when we look at the awardees in the physical sciences and engineering panel, we can see where the chemistry panels are. We can see that only 30% of the awardees are women. Now, of course, we could go on and on showing graphs and discussing values. But what we want to do today is start a conversation about why we should discuss about diversity, why we should commit to diversity, and why we should advocate for diversity in chemistry. So to talk about this with us, we have some amazing researchers that use their voice to advocate for diversity in chemistry. So I'd ask to all of our guests to switch on their camera and microphone, and I'll start introducing them, all of them one by one. So I'll start from Rachel. We have Rachel Hevey. She is a group leader at the University of Basel and a co-founder of the Swiss Women in Chemistry group within the Swiss Chemical Society. Rachel, would you like to tell us a bit more about you?
Yeah, perfect. So welcome everyone, and thanks for the invitation to be here. So I lead a group in Basel. We work on the development of carbohydrate-based drugs. So we make different mimics of native drug molecules. We synthesize them, and then we also do some biological assays in the lab. And as Claudia mentioned, I'm a co-founder of the Swiss Women in Chemistry Network. So this was an initiative launched in 2019 under the Swiss Chemical Society here due to a lack of female representation in meetings and on scientific boards in Switzerland. And yeah, obviously with COVID, things have been a bit hampered, but the group is already more than 400 members in Switzerland. So we've grown very quickly. We have mentoring programs, programs where students meet with females from industry, and also try to promote the work being done by female researchers in Switzerland. So thank you.
Thank you very much, Rachel. And I'm so happy to have you with us. I'll move to the next guest, who's Jovana Milic. She's an assistant professor, group leader, and a prima fellow at the University of Fribourg. Jovana, the floor is yours if you want to say a few words.
Well, thank you, Claudia, and thank you very much for organizing this important session. It's really a pleasure to meet you all. So I am indeed an assistant professor and group leader at the Adolf Merckle Institute of the University of Fribourg in Switzerland. And I've obtained my PhD in chemistry and applied biosciences of ETH Zurich in 2017. Since then, I worked as a scientist at the Laboratory of Photonics and Interfaces at EPFL until September 2020, when I've been fortunate enough to be offered a group leader position and to obtain the Swiss National Science Foundation PRIMA grant for independent funding, which is a funding program that targets female researchers with a potential of obtaining a professorship in Switzerland. Now, my research interests are centered around the development of molecular and supramolecular materials for energy conversion, with a particular focus in photovoltaics. Now, this is a highly interdisciplinary field at the interface of chemistry, material science, semiconductor physics, and device engineering. And we aim to develop smart materials that can adapt to their operating conditions with their particular functionality in different devices. But apart from this passion for research and various interdisciplinary and international collaborations, I've been also invested in science outreach and policy, as well as education, such as through the activities of the European Young Chemists Network, which is one of the organizers of this meeting, the EYCN, as their former network's team leader, but also as governance team member at the International Younger Chemists Network, which is dedicated to connecting and supporting young chemists globally. So with that, it is once more a pleasure to meet you all, and I very much look forward to this discussion.
Thank you very much, Jovana. It's great to have you here as well. I'll move to the next guest, who is Jess Wade. Jess is an Imperial College Research Fellow and also a UNESCO and L'Oréal for Women in Science Fellow at the Imperial College in London. Jess, you want to tell us something about you?
Yeah, thanks so much for inviting me, Claudia. And I'm just completely honored to join everyone else on this great session. So my name is Jess. I'm a research fellow at Imperial. I work in the Department of Materials, and I'm really interested in chiral materials and how we can use chiral organic semiconductors to emit circularly polarized light, absorb circularly polarized light, and also transport spin polarized electrons. And I'm trying to study the ways that these beautiful and wonderful molecules do this and then apply them to a whole bunch of different devices. But recently, and kind of throughout my scientific career, I've really focused on ways we can improve gender equality and equity more broadly in the sciences. I started off, I trained in physics, so a lot of my efforts and advocacy were there. But then when you start to look around, you see women, people of color, and people from different historically marginalized groups are pretty much excluded from top positions. And I've worked really hard online and offline to try and change that. And I look forward to learning from the rest of my panelists about what they've been doing.
Thank you very much, Jess. So last but not least, we have Tom Welton, who is a professor at Imperial College of London and is also the president of the Royal Society of Chemistry. So Tom, thank you very much for being with us. Do you want to tell us a bit about yourself?
So no, thank you for the invitation. It's a pleasure to be here, and and to be the person that, for a very rare occasion for Jess, is after her in the alphabet by virtue of my E. I was the world's first professor of sustainable chemistry, and I work mainly with ionic liquids. So if you take table salt and heat it up, eventually it melts, and that makes an ionic liquid. 801 degrees isn't a lot of use to anybody, and so by careful design of the ions, we can make something which is still a pure salt, but at room temperature. And then my research over the years has been, is that interesting? Is it useful? And fortunately, the answer to both those questions is yes. Alongside that, I have for a long time worked on diversity in chemistry and science more generally. I'm very well known to be a gay man. But really, my management contributions in this area began when I was the head of department of the chemistry department, and I'll talk about that in a little bit later, when we won our first Athena Swan Award and then our second award, which was a gold award. But since then, I am an advocate for diversity, I think you say.
Amazing. So it was great to hear a bit about your science. You do amazing things, and now I want to do exactly what you do and learn even more about what you just told me. But I guess I'll remind all the audience and all the attendees that they can ask any question or post any comment they might have, and we'll try to address them in real time. But just as a kickoff question, you probably have thought about that, and so it would be nice to have your, 1-2 sentence answer to this question. Why do you think diversity is important? Well, we can go with the same alphabetical order that we started from, and then if whoever wants to, comment on someone else's comment, you feel free to do that. So yeah, Rachel, what do you think? Why do you think diversity is important?
Yeah, I mean, I think for a number of reasons. There's like a large pool of talent that is excluded, I think, when we're not diverse, whether it's race or gender. I think, there's so much more science and ideas and stuff that can be generated. And so this is really a benefit to society to just be able to include more people. I think also by having really diverse and balanced teams, people feel more welcome. And I think this also creates an environment where people are happier and therefore also, more productive. When people want to be there, they just and feel valued. Then, yeah, I think so. I think both from a personal point, just because it's the right thing to do, but I also think if we look at the science behind it, diverse teams are much more successful and productive, and so I think there's a lot of different benefits to be had. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. It's very true what you said. So now, Jovana, what do you want to add to that? I think by the time we get to Tom, there will be no much more left to say, but
that's what I was thinking.
Well, it's still quite difficult to answer this question in a very concrete manner, as there are so many benefits. And apart from the fact that we really live in an incredibly diverse society, which should make diversity come naturally, I also believe that diversity is a necessary component when it comes to addressing many global challenges, which really requires a diverse set of perspectives and experiences and approaches to addressing problems and solving challenges. But even if we put aside this more pragmatic perspective, as it is well known that diverse teams are much more successful and productive, just recognizing diversity makes us much more humane. And I believe that this is already a cause worth fighting for.
Yeah, that's so true. Yeah. So yeah, Jess, what do you want to add to this?
I'm gonna try and come up with one. And I do feel like Tom is gonna be clutching at straws, but he'll always be okay because he's our leader. But I think I started this, and probably like most people, you start in this work because it's fair, right? It's fair for everyone to have equal opportunity. It's fair for everyone to have the chance to become a chemist or a physicist or a material scientist or a beautician or a hairdresser. Whatever people want to do when they start, they should be able to be given that opportunity. And we see those chances kind of be taken away from people from really young ages. From when you're at high school in the UK, you can opt out of studying chemistry at the age of 15 or 16. So really early on, you're making a decision that will impact the rest of your life. And I think that I came at this from a very equity-based perspective. But everything that Jovana and Rachel have said so far really emphasizes that point, that science is better when it's done by more diverse groups of people. The scientific community should reflect the society that it serves. And you can see it really, really brilliantly in tech and the design of medical trials and pharmaceuticals, how not having representation of people from specific groups impacts the outcome of the science. And it's less easy to see that if we're designing ionic liquids or solar panels, but we shouldn't try and trick ourselves into thinking that we've got the best and brightest minds if we're excluding really big parts of the population. So I firmly believe that science is better when it's done by a diverse group, but I also care a lot about the equity side as well.
Yeah, that's very true. Tom, it's up to you now.
No, that's fine. So, of course, I do agree with everything that has been said. And, had I gone first, I might have said those things. But the final thing that I think I would like to add is, which is a kind of very personal thing, which is diverse groups are more interesting to be part of. Actually, I get nourished by meeting people who are different to me. I get nourished by meeting people who come from different parts of the world that I do. I get nourished by people whose experiences are different to mine. And so on top of all of these kind of pragmatic things, there's a terribly personal thing of, do you know what? I would much rather be in a diverse group than in a boring, homogeneous one.
Yeah, I share that feeling. So we have a question from the audience, to which I'm going to add something. I've read a tweet a few days ago about a female group leader that was sharing her story about the fact that her group was a fully male group, and she could not attract women to her group. Now, the question that we have that ties together to what I've just, this example that I just shared, is how do you address these kind of problems? How do you incentivize diversity within your group? Any of you, whoever has something to share. Yeah, Tom.
I'll go first this time. So what I would say, so the thing that I absolutely struggle and work hard not to do, as I would look around, I'm the oldest person on this panel, is the idea that, oh, that person reminds me of what I was like at their age. And if I allow that idea to control the people that, you know, when I go into an undergraduate laboratory at Imperial College and I'm thinking, oh, who might be a great student one day? If I allow reminds me of myself when I was their age, then I'm in trouble, because I will only go to the men, and probably I will only go to the tall blonde men as well, you know, and so struggling not to do that, and actually doing that, you know, practically that is what you do at a place like Imperial College, where there are many fantastic undergraduates who might one day be PhD students. Look for people who aren't like yourself and go up to them and encourage them that this is something that they can want to do, that they can aspire to that thing, and really just be very, very open about also your own struggles. And that, do you know what, when I was your age, I didn't think that this was open to me, but it was, and I just, you know, and encouraging people.
Yeah, that's a great advice.
I would completely echo that, kind of letting people in, welcoming people in, especially when you're in those early stages of your career. In the US, physics has a really big problem keeping people in physics majors, because everyone starts university and starts studying physics, and they're quite good at recruiting diverse cohorts of people, but they switch major halfway through because they don't like the environment, because it becomes toxic, because of all of these different reasons. And what researchers have found is that you can completely change the demographics of who stays in subjects like physics and chemistry by offering people opportunities to work in labs, by introducing them to different researchers, by reminding them why they love the subject that they started out studying. So I think kind of letting people into your networks and into your labs and into your group meetings, that will make people from more diverse backgrounds want to join the teams that we're hopefully, in my case, one day leading.
Yeah, that's so true. Yeah, that's true. Yeah, Jovana.
This really resonates with me, and I really believe that just nurturing this mindset and communicating it openly in all the environments in which we operate, by welcoming people with a variety of different backgrounds within our bubble, our environment, or people we interact with, and just constantly being mindful of nurturing this diversity within the scope of our colleagues that we work with, but also collaborators, and emphasizing it in the process can really help foster this kind of environment.
Yeah, Rachel, you have something to add to this, to all of these amazing.
Yeah, I mean, everyone's already, you know, mentioned some really great points. I would just kind of echo what Jess said as well about letting people into lab spaces, just exposing them at an early age, because I think a lot of the time you know, when it's kind of first generation academics and whatnot, this just seems so foreign and so out of reach, these professorships. And I think just to speak to them and let them know the process, I think when you really go through it step by step, you realize that it is possible. But I think if someone doesn't go through or really share their experiences, it just seems so far out of reach. And so I think this can really help with diversity as well, because you know, often they don't have these more senior role models to look up to, and so everyone, when they just see people in senior positions as different from them, then they just really think it's not possible. So I think just really talking to people and encouraging them can be really beneficial.
Yeah, that's true.
I would like to just add that briefly, if that's okay, Claudia. I mean,
go on.
Just this concept of sharing the struggle in order for people to feel more welcome to the environment is so important. And I just want to mention that there have been some initiatives like this, such as these mentorship initiatives or mentorship talks, where the community and the representatives of the community are invited to not only share their successes, but really explicitly share their struggles in the process that might then really help also younger colleagues to relate from different backgrounds, really relate to these role models.
I guess, so we have another question that I'll try to paraphrase, and I think Jess might be the right person to start off on this. So do you think that the issues we are facing in terms of diversity in chemistry and in general in science is somehow mirroring the difficulties that there might be at the educational level, you know, to convince students to get into science because, you know, science used to be thought as something that is difficult to understand, that is mostly about, you know, memorizing formulas or doing, you know, weird chemical experiments and not something as funny as it is actually. So do you think that at the educational level, we are already introducing some kind of problem also in terms of diversity?
I think physics definitely has that problem. Physics definitely has that image problem of being, you know, done by wrinkly old white men 1,000 years ago with blackboards in their offices and, you know, writing with chalk and all of this. And physics definitely has an image problem that puts people off. And physicists also put people off because they like to come across as complete geniuses who know everything. And that makes a lot of people feel like they couldn't do that. But I think chemistry is different. And chemistry is different in the UK, at least, and probably more broadly across Europe, because it's fundamentally important to studying medicine. You know, you can't get into a medical degree in the UK without having studied chemistry to an advanced level at school. Medicine is quite gender balanced, so chemistry is too. And so chemistry undergraduate is actually pretty gender balanced. So I don't think it's because of what happens at high school. And everyone loves their weird chemistry experiments that they get to do at high school. I think it's about the environment that we create within science that isn't doing enough to show women and chemists of color and chemists who are LGBTQ+, or chemists who aren't fully able, so chemists with disabilities. We're not doing enough to encourage those people to join this community of researchers, and to show them that there are people just like them here from similar backgrounds who are being really successful. So I think actually chemistry isn't so much about how hard or how weird it is. It's a lot more about that encouragement and that participation and that support through your early, mid, and then late career, and changing the kind of structures within institutions to better support people from non-conventional backgrounds and different paths. So I think it's a bigger structural issue within science itself. It's not so much let's blame the high school teachers, which physics has that problem.
Okay. Yeah, I'm wondering if Tom has something to add to that.
Yeah, so back in 2007, 2008, the RSC did a couple of reports on the intentions people had for their future at the beginning and at the end of a PhD. And what they found was, not surprisingly, people are entering their PhDs and men and women. It's what the survey was about, but I'm sure the same thing would resonate with other people from other minorities, that there was no difference. By the end of the PhD, there was a huge difference. And when they dug deeper in and did focus groups and the like, what they discovered was very much that some of it was people's own experience. So, you know, things that happened to me while I was doing my PhD have more or less put me off. And sort of some people viewing it, you know, particularly the men viewing it as a rite of passage, as opposed to actually something nasty is happening to me. But most particularly, what they found was that people were looking at the postdoc career, the next step ahead of them, and saying, that looks dreadful, I don't want it. And of course, they were very talented. They were very able. They could get jobs doing something else. And so they left because they did not want the path that they saw before them, and particularly that postdoc bit.
Yeah, thanks. Yeah, so true. Yeah. So I guess we move to the next question. And the next question, I'd say, is for Jovana and for Rachel. The next question is a tricky one that says, if you think about the graph that we saw before about the leaky pipeline, the question is, where do women end up? Where do they disappear to? What happens to them? So yeah, either Rachel or Jovana, whoever wants to start. What do you think? Where do we end up?
I can start. I think, I mean, it's a gradual drop off as time goes. I personally, I mean, I've also felt it myself, where at the beginning, you know, I really thought I can do this academic career, and I definitely have days where I have to deal with situations and I just think it's not, sometimes not worth the effort. So I think just minor situations that happen, passive aggressive comments, I think eventually, yeah, it just gets really exhausting. And so I think when there's alternative career choices, or, you know, for chemistry in particular, I think having children is, this is really challenging, you know, if you're still at the stage in your career where you have to work in the lab, and, you know, for the duration of the pregnancy, this is a problem. So there's really, you know, career gaps that can happen, which then, you know, for future grants or for future positions, maybe make you a less strong candidate on paper, I should say. But I think this is really a problem. And then I think in some studies as well, they show that, you know, for more senior level positions and promotion, that supervisors often, when they're asked to recommend someone for a talk, one of their students, then they tend to, from unconscious bias, you know, think of a male student first, and it's not intentional, but this just happens. And also with projects that they give kind of, you know, with shared tasks in the group, that men, it's just with men and women here, but men are more often given kind of high risk, high reward projects that, when they're successful, benefit the CV, whereas women are more often given kind of tasks like equipment maintenance and this type of thing. And so I think with time, this really affects how the CV looks at the end of a degree and at the end of a postdoc. So I just think it's important to kind of keep this in mind, especially when you're in a supervisory role. Just keep in mind the unconscious bias, because this just affects the next steps in the career progression.
Yeah, so. Yeah, that's so true. Yeah, Jovana, do you have something you want to add to this?
Well, indeed, the graphs that you have been focused on are mainly illustrating either the grant application or the situation in academia, in which case I really agree with Rachel that most women also tend to then, in case of women, for instance, really try to find alternative career paths because the environment is not very supportive. And this often turns out to be industry or private sector. In Switzerland, we see also this at another level, because for women who do have a family and are mothers, we see even a stigma against working 100%. That's something that Rachel might have had the chance to experience as well, where many women really reduce their workload because it is expected that the partner could be paid sufficiently for the family to be sustained without the woman really working 100%, and this then results in maybe not necessarily changing, but not really progressing across this career path and really remaining at roles that are not then perceived as leadership roles or without many opportunities for growth in this direction, not necessarily just in academia, but we do see this in academia as well. So these are some of the problems that then relate to other points that the panelists were highlighting, being the support of the environment that is really important. And it's not, we speak about the diversity in chemistry, really having mechanisms within academia, within the funding agencies to support underrepresented groups and to address some of the challenges that really lead to them changing these career paths.
Yeah. I was actually thinking to one of the things that Rachel said. She mentioned unconscious bias, and we have a question that is related to that. So how do you realize that you have unconscious bias? How do you fight unconscious bias? Because there are a lot of, so one of the questions that we are receiving is that there are a lot of barriers against diversity. So how do you act against those barriers that we are creating ourselves, even sometimes without knowing, and to those that are actually in place? What do you do? Whoever wants to start. Yeah. Jess.
I'll just start really briefly by saying, I think you have to kind of read and listen and engage with things that make you feel uncomfortable. There was a lot of discussion in the last year and a half around Black Lives Matter, and there was a strike for Black Lives and an academic strike for Black Lives, and the Black in Chemistry movement and all of those phenomenal things online, and people sharing very personal stories. And I think when you sit there and you read it and you engage in these discussions and you listen and you think critically about it, you realize the impacts of your day-to-day, how you act in the lab, how you lead your group, how you run your journal club, which students you ask questions of first, how you distribute the roles when you're assigned a new class of students to teach. And I think you've got to engage with those conversations that make you feel a little bit uncomfortable. And that's when you know that you're really starting to think about it. I mean, there are implicit bias tests you can do online. There's that Harvard one that everyone cites. There's really great resources made by the Royal Society of Chemistry under Tom's leadership, and also the Royal Society, that really walk you through it. And there are workshops you can do in all of this. But I think that you personally have to engage yourself with the massive body of literature and stories that are now being shared on social media and in journals to really kind of do your own homework. And that would prepare you for thinking about where your biases are and ways that you can mitigate them.
Yeah, that's true. I think Jovana was
yeah. So I wanted
to.
I absolutely agree with Jess, and I actually wanted to add just engaging also with a lot of advocacy groups and groups that are doing an incredible work in really sharing not only their story, but to an extent also sharing information that educates the community. And I've personally experienced this even as a woman in science. I remain forever grateful to the so-called Society for Women in Natural Sciences of ETH Zurich, as when I first time when I heard about their existence at a time when I was a PhD student, I was very surprised. And at a time I even asked myself, why do we even need a Society for Women in Natural Sciences? So I really attended one of their, because naively I believed, how can there be a problem? We haven't really been in a scientific environment. No, we are all very, very reasonable and professional. So I'm actually incredibly grateful, because the early activities of this society really helped me realize where the problems are and how can I better really contribute to resolving some of these and contributing to a more diverse and inclusive environment in that regard. So really not only doing the work on our side, but also engaging more with some of the advocacy groups that are greatly contributing to the cause.
Yeah, thanks. In the interest of time, there's one other question that I wanted to ask, which I find very interesting. what do you think of the forms that constantly ask about sexual orientation, race, ethnicity, and so on? Of course, they are for statistical purposes, but sometimes it feels like they are marginalizing rather than making things inclusive. So what do you think about this in general? Maybe Tom can start.
So actually self-declaration is a very difficult and complex area. So for instance, if the form asks, are you disabled? I say no. If the form asks, do you have a disability? I say yes, because I do. But I am not bloody disabled by it. It is you that are disabling me by the way you have constructed your world. And so it's not, you know, being disabled, the noun is not about me. The noun comes from outside. And so there are different people react to these forms differently. I think that people who are gathering data do need to explain very clearly why they are gathering it and what the positive outcome from that gathering is expected to be. Because otherwise it is just, you know, highlighting your differences. Okay, well, fair enough. But, you know, I can see why many people don't want to engage with that process. So it has to be very, 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 very clearly stated why the information is wanted, how it is going to be used, and how that will lead to positive outcomes.
Yeah. It's actually, I hadn't realized that there's actually way more behind that, those kind of questionnaires than this. Yeah, that's true. I don't know if anyone wants to add anything, or we can wrap up. Yeah, Jess.
I think that what Tom said is incredibly important, and it just emphasizes that importance of the power of language, which I completely didn't master then. But how you phrase something, how you ask a question on a form, when you see those statements that we see increasingly on job adverts that say, you know, we encourage women to apply, how you phrase that and structure it, I think is so crucial to how people interpret it and interpret your motivation. And it can be weaponized by people who really don't share the same views as you on fighting for change. You know, this whole discussion around women and people from minority groups being appointed just because they're women and people from minority groups. That's because of clunky language on these kind of forms. So we really have to have conversations about language and about the terminology that you use to describe people, whether they're living with different conditions, whether they have different skin colors, whatever their gender is, and have those kind of sensitive conversations out in the open first before we choose what we put on our forms or what we kind of put on our job adverts. So I think researching that as well is really crucial.
Yeah, that's so true. That's so true. Okay, so this was an incredibly interesting session, and unfortunately it's already getting towards the end, but I'd like to ask you all one more question. It's more like an advice for the young chemists that are attending our session. So I guess we'll start with Rachel. So what do you think we can do, we as young chemists, well, everyone really, but what can young chemists do to support diversity?
I think, you know, always when you're organizing, you know, student meetings and stuff, to think about who you're inviting, to already be aware from an early stage. And I think also building an environment with your team that's very welcoming to everyone. So I think really spending time educating yourself. There's a lot of resources already mentioned previously available online, just so that you can maybe help yourself kind of understand someone else's experience when it's been different than yours, and just to really create an environment. And also apply for things, you know, if you think you don't belong, do the thing, you know, like apply for that award you think you can't get. Don't hesitate to ask people to nominate you for things, for your supervisor. You know, quite often I talk to students and they think, oh no, I can't ask that, they're too busy. But, you know, other people ask this. So I think just have the confidence and do the thing. And yeah.
You made an effort to cover all the possible answers from everyone.
Sorry.
I guess I don't know, we go with Jovana.
There are a lot of points that I share with Rachel, and I would share this as an advice. Maybe in addition, apart from maybe encouraging people at this point, but being really mindful about changing some of the mechanisms in our environment that can really facilitate this change and support it, from our universities, communicating issues and advocating for change actively at all the levels, from our universities to even grant agencies, because funding agencies, because there are many opportunities to further support the underrepresented groups, and many of them are simply also not communicated on or made clear, or alternative solutions have not been proposed. I think that we also need to be more active in the context of really changing some of these mechanisms to the best of our capacity as young scientists.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah. We continue with the alphabetical order. We go for Jess. Yeah.
I'm gonna big up Tom, unsurprisingly anyway, and say we need more leaders like people like Tom, you know, presidents of things that are so important, like the Royal Society of Chemistry, who really recognize and take this on board as an issue. The chemistry department at Imperial completely changed under Tom's leadership, and we need those people in positions of power. And I think another really great move that the Royal Society of Chemistry did in the last few years is change their recognition so that they award and recognize that science is done by teams, not by individuals. And I think that that's so critical for kind of improving diversity, equality, and kind of who we celebrate and champion in science. And so more professional bodies doing that, saying we're going to give team awards for science and for breakthroughs now, not silly old-fashioned Nobel Prizes that go to 3 people who started the field 100 years ago. So yeah, I think we need more people who really care about diversity and leadership, and we also need to move to a system where funding agencies and awarding bodies recognize that science is a team sport.
Yeah. Tom.
So, and now I'm going to pick up Jess. And so role model does not mean old person. And, you know, I do a presentation about my role models, and Jess is in that presentation. And what I would say to all, there you go, I knew I'd embarrass her. What I would say to all of you is, no matter where you are in the academic career, there are people looking at you saying, that is my idea of success. That is what I want to achieve. So make sure that you are modeling the behaviors that you would like to see reproduced, and be an excellent role model.
Yeah, that's very true. Yeah. So we need to close the session. I am only a few minutes late, so I think that's a great success. I'd like to thank all of our guests. You've been amazing, and I would keep talking with you like for hours. So this is, let's say, just the beginning, and I'm sure we'll have a chance to talk more about diversity in science and in chemistry in the coming months and years, hoping that we get to see that the advices that we share today will actually be used and do something. So I need to remember to all the attendees and the participants to EYCheM that they need to move back to the Zoom link for the afternoon session at the end of the workshop. And I wish all the participants a nice break. And then a nice afternoon session. And I guess with this, I ask all the guests to stay around just to say bye. And thank you again to all of you for participating today.